Since all the panelists have joined, I'm going to go ahead and give a brief introduction of NDCC and our wonderful speakers for tonight. And then I'll go over and hand over our conversation to Jamila White, who is our moderator for tonight. So thank you for joining us for the conversation on empowering Black communities through a political lens. And this webinar really goes into the historical and contemporary significance of Black political engagement, examining how activism and advocacy have really shaped policies and social change. And we really go over strategies to amplify Black voices in the political arena, especially in the current circumstances, and focusing on voter mobilization, civic education, and coalition building. So just certain things about the webinar. We are recording the webinar. Please make sure to be muted unless you're speaking. If you're invited to speak, please make sure to unmute yourself and then mute yourself once you're finished. And if you're speaking for asking a question, please try to keep it brief to respect everyone's time and to give everyone a chance to ask a question. We will be recording the webinar, as I mentioned before, so please make sure not to record any part of the webinar. We will make the recording available to everybody. And then certain events that are coming up for NDCC, we have our in-person workshops, which are Breaking Financial Barriers one. And that then we have the Power of Connections, Building Relationships for Growth and Opportunity. We have Mastering Public Speaking and Networking. And so these are all upcoming workshops that NDCC is doing. We also have the membership meeting. This will be virtual on Zoom. This is next Monday, and it is a thing that NDCC does for every fourth Monday of the month. We have a membership meeting to really for a place for solidarity, empowerment, and to really put the community together and to have conversations. So this is a great way to get involved and become a member of the NDCC and get to know more about us. So I'll make sure to include the registration link in the chat, and you can register for that as well. And then I'll go ahead and
hold on, Amal, hold on a second. I do want to make note announcement of the National Conference on Black Cooperative Agenda.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
You want to go ahead and give that announcement?
Yeah, so we have our upcoming conference on Black Cooperative National Agenda in June, this June. It'll take place in Atlanta, Georgia this year. So we're really looking forward to seeing you all there. I don't know if the link is available right now, but if it is, I'll make sure to.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but
Oh,
I'll make sure that they all get it.
Okay, yeah. And I'll also make sure to add it to the chat as well. So that is also something that is upcoming for NDCC. So we're looking forward to seeing you all there. So yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers. So Jamila White, who is a moderator for tonight, she is a liberationist, a global community development advocate with over a decade of experience in Africa and the Caribbean. Deeply committed to social justice, a value instilled by trailblazing women in her family, Jamila empowers Black communities globally to gain agency and power. As a cooperative operator, she fosters collaboration and business and shared ownership. Jamila holds a bachelor's in business management from Hampton University and a master's in public administration from Indiana University. Guided by the belief that everyone deserves a dignified life, she dedicates her work and leadership to advancing economic development and equity. We have Tama Yisrael, who is our first speaker for tonight. Tama is the Chief Solutions Officer of TMH Financial Services and a member of Resolve Financial Cooperative. She founded TMH in 2018 to support small businesses, nonprofits, and social enterprises in Greater New Orleans. She also serves as the outsourced executive director of the Builders of the Highway Foundation, leading mergers and developing educational community centers in New Orleans, Miami, and Orlando. She previously served as the president of the New Orleans Food Co-ops Board and is now organizing a cooperative movement while working as a project officer for the Cooperation New Orleans Loan Fund. We have Tavian Crossland, who is the co-founder of the Restorative Justice Cooperative, a for-profit organization focused on systems change through cooperative economics in the cannabis industry with over 20 years of experience in the legacy cannabis market. He has worked in the wholesale and retail distribution and built 2 growth facilities in Colorado. A committed advocate for racial economic justice, Tavian founded New York Scene Social Equity Empowerment Network chapter and is a fellow at the Justice Foundation. He also participated in New York State's CANA compliance training and mentorship program, ensuring equitable industry access for legacy entrepreneurs. And with that, I'll give the conversation over to Jamila, our moderator for tonight.
Thank you so much, Amal, for those wonderful introductions. And thank you everyone for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. Ramadan Mubarak, everyone. I hope that you all are enjoying this holy season for those who are celebrating Happy International Women's Month, happy Black Women's History Month, happy everything for everyone. So it's just a pleasure and an honor to be with you all tonight. I am Jamila White, like Amal had mentioned, and we're going to get started, get right into conversations. And one of the things we like to start off with is understanding where we're all coming from and like what are we solving for as we get into this conversation. Thank you, JD. Sending greetings to everyone. So we're gonna start the first question for both of our panelists to understand what Tavian and Tamad, what both of you all are solving for, and you can use that opportunity to introduce your work and your organization more. So what are you solving for? Um, how's your organization help you to solve for that? So let's start with Tavian.
Yes, hello, hello. Thank you for holding this space. Thank you, Jamila. My name is Tavian Crossland. I'm the Equity Director for Social Equity Empowerment Network, the New York chapter. We help Black and Afro Latinx entrepreneurs into the legal cannabis space, and also work towards developing cooperatives inside of the New York cannabis distribution side of the supply chain. Um, the work that I do personally and with SEAM is anti-racist systems change and really trying to figure out alternative economic models, non-hierarchical and non-exploitative models of economy to really uplift the community um, and putting that at modes of production, particularly in the cannabis industry. Like I said, the distribution side of the supply chain, so cultivation and processing consumer packaged goods. And really, for me, when it comes to cannabis, it's a great intersection of different justice issues, carceral, food, environmental, um, so on and so forth, and an opportunity for us to really leverage a new billion-dollar industry for some sort of reparations, for some sort of restitution, uh, for what is a pretty unambiguous, uh, direct targeted attack against the Black community and Afro Latinx community. And we often don't get that opportunity to point at something so directly and say that the state did this fully on racial terms and then ask for restitution based on the state acting in that way based on racial terms. And I'm stating it that way. That's not how legislation is written because you can't name race, religion, so on and so forth inside of legislation. So that's not how the legislation is written, but that is the spirit um, of our cannabis law. And so developing cooperative economics, work on cooperatives, farmer co-ops in cannabis, and particularly in what they call communities disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, which are the Black and Afro Latinx communities that I was speaking about. So, setting up that sort of cooperative ecosystem in those communities, providing good jobs, good pay, good benefits, with the focus for those workers centered in those communities in which they are operating out of, those CDIs which they're operating out of, centered is the work I do and put forth in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tavian. Tamar, let's take it over to you. What are you solving for, and how's your organization, the work you're doing, helping you to solve for?
Yeah, first I want to thank the network for developing conscious communities, for creating this platform for these needed conversations. And as introduced, my name is Tamai Yisrael. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Cooperation New Orleans, which we are a movement for cooperatives and building the solidarity economy here in New Orleans. And one of the things we found in like discovering and exploring cooperatives, cooperative economics, we found that there was a disconnect from cooperative practices as a tool for us building our social and local economies. And in a place like New Orleans, like our culture, all of the ways of being are highly capitalized off of these greater powers. So people come into the city of New Orleans, tourism industries, other people from outside of the state tend to maximize off of like the capital that is created through our cultural activities, as well as like the talent that's here in our city. So we're really looking to figure out ways to bring those resources back to the people and build a truly democratic economy here locally. And we do this by one, advocating for cooperative practices and strategies as a way of being in our community, remembering and reflecting and reclaiming cooperativism as an ancient technology, something that people have done from the beginning of time. But also, this method of pooling our resources is a way of building power. You know, we tend to look at other players outside of our own selves as people we need to take power from, when I think the biggest piece is recognizing the power that we already have through our collective action. So a lot of this work is really centered towards remembering and reclaiming, empowering communities with resources. One of the many things that we offer here with Cooperation New Orleans is a loan fund, which is a non-extractive lending tool to help generate revenue for cooperatives to be, made in our city. We also have created the Black Liberation Co-op Academy, which is a mechanism to really help us bring back to memory in our collective conscious around how cooperatives have been the center of community economics from the beginning of time. And then there's another project that we have called Cooperation Gumbo, which is really going into the neighborhoods in the community and really exploring, mapping, and telling the story of how cooperatives shaped our communities, shaped the local economy, and shape how things are generated, how resources are generated in our cities. So New Orleans has a rich history of being a place for market opportunities and economic empowerment. However, a lot of the times those extractions take place from a government level and large corporation level. So we look at cooperatives as a way of leveraging and balancing that power out. And so I'm hoping to share a little bit more about that in this platform.
I think you're muted, Jamila.
You would think after 5 years, wouldn't be doing that. Thank you so much for giving us those, for giving us an overview. Let's get right into building some of this political power that both our panelists talked about in terms of opportunities that we have, where we're looking to go, building that political power, both for systems change and building up, right? And so let's start with kind of the attacks on everything Black right now. And I'll be very honest, whether we want to call it attacks on wokeness, DEI, we know that it's attacks on Black people specifically and primarily anti-Black. And so can you all talk about what some of the work that you're doing in building this like Black political power for Black liberation, Black reparations in this current climate that we're in? And I'll just, say personally, this current climate, we've been in it since the beginning. It's just talked about differently. It may be publicized differently. It may be more overt instead of covert, but it's still a system of supremacy and imperialism that we've been dealing with since Europeans touched foot on this continent, on Turtle Island. But could you talk about some of the strategies that you're using, especially around building base, building people power, and if this time is actually a momentum for some of our communities to get into cooperative and solidarity work? So I'm gonna start with Tama to start, and then we'll go to Tavion. Tavion. I don't want to mispronounce it.
Tavion.
Tavion.
Yeah, thank you for again bringing this question. And like you just said, we've been here. We didn't just get here, right? This moment in history really has elevated it to our consciousness and also brought it out to a large number of other communities. So it's now more prevalent in other communities. But for the Black community, it's been here. This attack, the strategic effort to really build an economy where we're excluded and build it off of the backs of our people has been the nature of the beast from day one. So to say that, I want to just like really reflect off some of the movement work that has happened in our history, and really celebrating organizers like SNCC, Student Nonviolent community, around doing some work around action and really bringing to the young people's mindset around how it takes us being collective in our action to build this power and really speak out against it. I think it takes that level of organizing this day And I mentioned Cooperation Gumbo. One of the many tools that we are seeking to look to is utilizing cultural organizing as a way of building people in communities. So touching people in a way that we already know through song, arts, creativity to tell a story and build on a shared initiative. We learned a little bit from our work with the Highlander Center over the summer this last year to do some cultural organizing, but some of this we've already just kind of innately did without us even knowing that we were doing it as a cultural organizing. So we're using story circles to like get people to remember first, right? Because like you said, we've been here. We have to remember that we've been in this constant state of attacks on our community. So what are the ways that we built up protective systems in our communities, and how do we build on those memories as a strategy for today? And so story circles help us lift out like the ways our communities, our elders, and connecting our youth back to those strategies, because they may not have had access to that, but having a bridge for us to connect in conversation, I think is a really critical tool today. And this type of, platform provides space for you to really get to your people and have these conversations. And a story circle is a method that John O'Neill and some of the folks here, the organizers here in New Orleans, as well as in the South, use to really get people to connect to a mission, connect to these ideas in the ways that we're challenged, and really figure out ways that we can have a set a table to talk together and solve these problems. So it starts with, can we have a conversation? And what does it look like for us to build policy practice together in these conversations? And I'll stop there, but that's just one of the tools I want to lift out in this time.
Thank you. You actually prompted another follow-up question for me that's not on our question list. I hope it's okay. I'll take a little moderator's privilege to introduce that later. But I kind of want to pop this question over to Tavion too. One thing Tamar mentioned is like, we've been here, we've been in this moment. We have such a history, which lives in our DNA, because history lives in our DNA, of resistance, of survival, of cooperation. And at the same time, history also reminds us, especially when we looked at like economic liberation or economic wealth, when Black folks have come together for movements and come together, create Black Wall Streets, Black places, and I'm divest personally from that capitalistic Wall Street model, but it was burned down. Literally, the state attacked and sanctioned and allowed it to be burned down, from burning down Black communities that were trying to come together around some type of independence and building wealth, burnt to the ground, whether it was bombing Black communities that was organizing around liberation socially, like the attacks. And so thinking about all of that, that kind of came into presence, especially what you're doing, not looking to do, but what you're doing directly. How can we move forward with that truth in mind, knowing that in the past, when we've tried to build, not everything was burnt and destroyed, of course, but the blatant attacks, and knowing that we still have to build at the same time?
I think a lot of this starts with analysis and the ability to, like you said, look back on that history and connect the past and the present. There's this generational amnesia that happens, and we kind of forget the imagination and the pressure, and we fall into our comforts that the capitalist society will feed to you, and kind of lose that revolutionary radical Black tradition in the process, and also a part of losing that radical Black tradition is the misanalysis, the poor analysis that I see every day. I argue with a lot of Black capitalists, and it's a thing. And so, what are we organizing towards? What is the end vision of that? What is the program associated with that? I love that Tamar brought up SNCC. I recently got a chance to be a part of SNCC Legacy. I recently got to be a part of SNCC Legacy project and learn a little bit from Dr. Myers and Dr. Denode and Dr. Bador around this history of us organizing. And I actually wrote down, because I think it's such a beautiful document that we should reference consistently, is SNCC's program that they wrote back in 63, 64. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna let our ancestors breathe a little bit on this one as I get through this 11 step list. So number one is every person of working age shall be guaranteed by the government of the United States an annual income. Today we call that a UBI, but in 63, 64, this is what they was talking about. The negative income tax should be adopted to benefit those working people whose incomes fall below $3,000 a year. And that was based on 63, 64, but, you know, setting the floor for us. If you make less than 3,000, it'll be supplemented by the government. Every person shall have a proper home with electricity, heating, and running water, whether in rural or urban areas. Number four, every person shall receive free and complete medical care from the day they are born until the day they die. Number five, every person able to work shall be guaranteed a job at living wage. Number six, our brothers and sisters who live in rural areas need land. Every person who wishes to farm shall be given to them by the federal government sufficient acreage and a tractor and basic tools and equipment without cost. The title of the land should be handed over after working it for 3 years. The federal government, I thought this was interesting. The federal government should sponsor, wherever they are needed, cooperative farms and industries. Number seven, the president should declare national hunger emergency in at least 256 counties at migrant farm camps and Indian reservations. And I want to note here the amount of research and on the ground organizing that SNCC was doing and able to do can't be overlooked. It's going to take a lot. So if you want to know what it takes, a lot of your energy, a lot of your people, blood, sweat, and tears. It's going to take a lot, and a lot of analysis. Number eight, free school breakfast and lunches for every poor child. Number nine, the Office of Economic Funding should not be dismantled. Number 10, we call for a nationwide federally funded crash educational program to eliminate illiteracy. And I can say this is a big problem right now in our school systems and higher education systems right now as far as literacy. Number 11, it is all but impossible for people to use the vote to remove from power persons who control all the machinery of the election process and people who have controlled the machinery for almost 100 years. The people who control the elections are also the people who have economic power over the lives of poor voters in the community. That's the 11-point program by SNCC, written in 63, 64. And I bristle whenever somebody tells me things have changed. And so if you ask me, are we on the verge of anything, some sort of flip, I would say no, because I see the lack of analysis and I see the lack of a program and a connection to the imagination to ask for the things that we need with unapologetically, which we have been hamstrung to do. We haven't been given any sort of platform. So for me, the economic cooperative development as far as Black liberation and taking those reins into our own hands is what I look towards. I also look towards data that tells us that folks involved in co-ops and worker co-ops in particular are 30% more likely to be engaged in civics, voting, PTAs, communal programs, so on and so forth. I think that's because you see the contradiction between what a democracy looks like, a direct democracy and democratic leadership looks like, and what we have as a governing structure. And when you see that contradiction, you're called to action. And so you see that uptick in engagement. And so for me, it's more around local organizing, the people you can touch, bringing them into the room, bringing them into the conversation, pushing the analysis. That's what I do love about this moment. I do love about this moment that everything is on its face. I can say with unambiguity that there's a white supremacist in office, followed by a bunch of other white supremacists right behind him. And so what are we going to do here, right? Like where can we push this analysis? Where are you today? And where do we need you to be tomorrow in order for us to actually move towards what is Black liberation? The last thing I'll say is this. I do think we need to be able to oscillate between class conversation and race conversation and be able to go back and forth to make that argument. So right now, I would personally, tactically make more of a class argument and try to have some sort of cross-class collaboration in those conversations and bring the understanding around how these things are working for us right now. Mm-hmm. But in full context and understanding, because I don't want to give people the wrong thought, that we live in a U.S. racist capitalist society, right? And so that's why when I spoke about it, it's anti-racist systems change. Understanding capitalism as a racialized economy, full stop. Whether it's Black or white, it's racialized. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I want to pick up off a little bit of that and send it back over to you, Tamar. Excuse me, because a lot of the work you talked about was around coalition building. Well, no, let me go back. One, the solutions are already there. Whether coming from SNCC, coming from the Black Panthers Party 12-point program, coming from other civil rights leaders, even going all the way back to Harriet, like the solutions are there. They really haven't changed too much, just updated within the time. And looking at this current moment, what I'm hearing from you is there's opportunities for coalition building around other identities too. So looking at both our racial identities, but also our class identities, and just want to uplift that we're intersectional people, right? We have all of these identities that we live in and operate in this country, but as a strategy to get people more engaged, because so many Black Americans in general are just completely disengaged from the political process. And that's intentional. We know it's intentional to be like that. One of the tools to get them back engaged is through cooperative development, is through cooperative economics, cooperative learning, and conscious building as a way to actually practice that way to be democratic and then realize I can push that on a bigger level. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? I want to make sure I got it right.
Absolutely. I just,
I'm gonna let you go in. I'm gonna let you take off on that take it to the next level, build on.
And I'm so grateful for Tavian just lifting it out, because these are the same pillars, right? Nothing has changed. We still need to be aiming for, shooting for, reaching for these 11 things within as much as we can. I mean, and it may look different now, but not as different. And like you said, I shudder when people say things are changed. They not changed. We still got the same economic enemy. That enemy has been here from the beginning of time, like I spoke to earlier. And so just really wanting to hone in for us here in New Orleans, we found to build like these alliances, 5 pillars that we have conversations with. And I think it's important that how SNCC had some specific things they really want, ask for, demands. They're each organizing modality, however you show up in the movement, have some very specific things that you're aiming for in ways that people can cross collaborate with you. And so for us with Cooperation New Orleans, 5 of those pillars are our work is to provide alternatives to racial capitalism, right? We know that we're living in a racial capitalist economy, and every ounce of this economic practice, not one scintilla of it was built in a way that was ethical or moral. The whole idea of the US economy was built off of an unethical transaction from the beginning. 2, if you want to start there, you want to talk about the bodies that were stolen and the land and the bodies that were stolen collectively. 2 of those major things we can talk about, and communities across the globe are still impacted by these major tragedies to this very day. So how do we build economic systems that are built on fairness, just economy, righteous and ethical practices versus a capitalist economy that seeks to put the masses of wealth in the hands of a small percentage of the world's population? Makes no sense. it just makes no sense. So we have to build fair, equitable, just economies. And how do we do that with a lens of an alternative to racial capitalism? The second piece we look at is culture. We are cultural practitioners from the day we wake up, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep at night. Our ways of being have a lens of sharedness, connectedness, resources that come out of that. And those are our cultural activities. So we raise that and center that. While the current economy seeks to use those things as mechanisms to fuel their economy, we as people have to hold our culture really close to us and use that as our way of speaking to each other. And you mentioned Mother Harriet. Think about the work that was needed around liberation and the cultural practices that we deployed to help save us and seek liberation. So just, just that alone is a piece that we can look at and do that further inspection as you lifted out, Tavian. Power building, we do power building through our organizing, collectivizing, and sharing that power. And I won't stay here too long, but then we figure out ways to be in solidarity with those who think, believe, and see us as human. We're all humans and not capital mechanisms. They put land, labor, and capital as the basis for this economy, and we're not looked at in a way as humans. We're looked at as transactional. So solidarity around rehumanizing and humanizing our economy is ways that we build that coalition with people who are in this cross sectional work with us. And then, of course, decolonizing. You cannot do this work without us taking out the ways that we've been colonized inside of our bodies, inside of our minds, our communities, and institutions. So we hold these 5 pillars as a way for us to alliance build, and we share in ways that has happened historically, and think about ways that we can actually do this moving into our future. And I encourage those who are doing this work, wherever you are, have some set of core values, direct demands, ask that you're looking to move for. And SNCC modeled, and the Black Panther Party model what it looks like to have some outcomes or demands from your organizing efforts. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us some of the tools too, because you kind of took one of my questions. What are the tools we can use to actually get here? But I'm going to build up upon that because when I think about it, Taviana, are you in New York City? Is that where you at?
Yep, Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
Mhm.
We're in DC, New York, and New Orleans. 3 very much Black dominant, or if not majority Black, half Black, traditionally Black like DC. We used to be Chocolate City. Now people are like, we're more like Mocha City or something like that. It's been changing. But I'll think about DC specifically in New Orleans, where we have Black leadership. Majority of our leadership is Black at the local level, right? And in DC, one of the wealthiest cities in the world, not just the country, where I'd say the most powerful city in the world, DC, right? Where we have one of the greatest racial wealth gaps. White wealth is 81% times Black wealth. At the same time, we have some of the largest concentrations of Black home ownership in what you typically define as wealth, right? And just thinking about in terms of our outcomes being so different if you're a Black Washingtonian versus a non-Black Washingtonian, right? And this is another question that's really not on our list that I'm diverging off from hearing from you all. So if we're looking at, say, DC, New Orleans, and New York as examples, how do we change our localities and localities that are Black run, right? And push towards this more liberation, cooperative, solidarity ways of being, and less from this capitalistic extractive sector, right? Do you think that these are the cities to start with, actually? Do you think that these places where we have Black leadership already is a place for us to start? Or do you think we just need to start everywhere, any pocket that we can to build up to these transformations? Because sometimes for me, it's hard to sit and look back at DC with so much, power that's in the hands of Black people, and then also looking right out my window and seeing so much opportunity that's being disinvested and being displaced. So I just want to try to reconcile that, right? And we know that it doesn't require for you to be Black to uphold white supremacy because it's a system. These are systems that are maintained by people, whether you are white skin, Black skin, another skin, they're maintained by people. So I'm going to kick that over to you, Tavion, to start us off with. We're all in Black cities, Black majorities, Black leadership, and some of the biggest racial wealth gaps, some of the most disparities, the outcomes, and you look who's in prison, 98% are Black people from that city. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think well, I was recently at the Black Caucus this 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago at this point. And as I stood there in the mixer, I asked myself this question. I was like, man, there's a lot of Black people here. Like almost everyone I see, right? And granted, it's the Black Caucus, but still, I was just like, wow, this is a lot of Black people here. And I couldn't quite reconcile, like you said, my realities based on this picture that I'm looking at during that time. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier as far as analysis. Like when you're talking about, so we on different tracks basically. And what I didn't mention the last conversation, and I guess that's why we're having a full conversation, is the need to organize outside of the Democratic Party. And I think that's pretty much what you're looking at, right? We're not talking about independents, Black representatives, no, we're talking about Black Democrats voting for the same things or non-action, right? We looking at the same thing. We're not organizing, we're not pressuring them, we're not doing a lot as a as a community. There's so much going through my head. I'm sorry. As I think about this and try to reconcile, because it's infuriating, basically. But yeah, we need to actually organize outside of the Democratic Party and take our power back through that way, and offer up other candidates, offer up other grassroots movements that folks can look to lend their support and build some sort of local political power, and start pressing on that, and basically having them lose races, right? And once they lose enough races, then what usually happens, like Democrats never do anything left or leftist. They just don't. They're forced to. We organize outside of them and push the Overton window more left, and they are forced to adopt our agendas because they want to win elections, right? And so that's pretty much how I see it. We have to ask for everything that we deserve and know that we should have in the systems in which we want to see it in, and have full-blown imaginations, and just talk about it, and then actually support, and not. So what ends up happening, and this is how I reconcile it. What ends up happening is we have a lot of the same language. Mm-hmm. Say racism, we say anti-Blackness, we say, this system doesn't work for us, or so on and so forth. We're talking about totally different things. Right? I can have a full-blown conversation with someone who believes in Black liberation and Afrocentrism and maybe even Pan-Africanism and so on and so forth, and then find out they're Black capitalists. Find out they fully believe in the capitalist economy and how that works, and the hierarchies and so on and so forth, right? We just had a whole conversation. What were we talking about? How did we share so much vocabulary and totally miss each other that entire time, right? And for me, that's the lack of analysis, but also, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how you get to use the same vocabulary and actually not be talking to each other, is when y'all don't share an analysis, share the vocabulary, have deeper conversations to actually understand what a person is saying when they say racism, or when they say anti-Blackness, or when they say left, right? Like, what are you actually talking about? What do you imagine that to mean? I mean, one of the first questions I ask is like, well, what is capitalism to you? Right? Like, how do I know you mean what I'm saying when I ask that question, or when you tell me that thing? And as we start to unpack that, we figure out the things that we are saying the same and the things that we are saying that's different. And now we get to actually talk about where our alignment is in the ways in which we could collectively organize, because we're on the same page now. We're not just ships passing in the night. So that was a long way of telling you how I reconcile it, but yes.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you named the Democratic Party specifically and didn't shy around from it. And I'm going to pass that over to you, Tamar, to build off if you as much as you can. But, you know, Black folks are the most loyal identity segment of our population to the Democratic Party. Hands down, absolutely. And this party has, in my opinion, just consistently let us down over and over. Yes, there may have been some, oh, we have these small wins, but when you're looking at outcomes for Black people, we're actually getting worse. We know, many of us on this call, that Black wealth is expected to be in the negatives for the first time in the history of Black people being in this country, right? That we're going to have negative wealth. We know that here in DC, some of our literacy rates are the same as 100 years ago, right? In terms of percentages of folks not reaching certain levels of literacy. So our outcomes are, as a collective, right, are not getting the substantial gains as we see other communities, right, getting those huge substantial gains. And so with Black people kind of still being the most loyal to the Democratic Party and not seeing that return on investment, return on loyalty, and we've just seen that with the new DNC elections and who they put into power, looking at what they're going back to, right? We saw that in this last presidential election, in my opinion, how we tried to court too many moderate conservatives, or what we thought was moderate conservatives, and leaving the loyal base behind. So looking at, we need a new alternative. We need an alternative, right? And this is something Black folks have been saying for so long. Are there any alternatives that are promising right now that we can think of for folks to look to? And here locally in DC, we have a lot of different political parties. And sometimes when I do start talking to Black folks, or even and non-Black folks too, who are similarly aligned about other parties, it's just the look at you like, are you a Marxist? Are you a this? Are you a this? Is like, what does even that mean? Define Marxist, define socialist. Are you not a socialist? Are you sure you're not? Like some of that miseducation is there, but you're automatically othered, or like, this is a radical person, like thinking that justice is radical, like all human life is valued as radical. Where do we start? Like, where are some organizations or some inroads that we can really start? And I think the local level, like you said, Tavion, is absolutely the place to start and to build up. But are there any organizations, are there any political parties that you can think of right now that people can maybe check out as they're thinking, where do I start to build political power with people who are more like-minded as myself? And it's really gonna not just dismantle systems, but build up systems that are inclusive, that have real promise, and are not gonna just be like, oh, those are crazy leftists or crazy radicals or crazy whatever, where we're able to build from at that local level. And one of the things I'm reminded of is that was a GOP strategy, right? They started local. Who's on your school board? Small positions, right? Unpaid position. What is the commissioner? What is this? What is that? Let me radicalize you, or not radicalize me, indoctrinate you this way, because I'm already building off the hatred of Black people. So it's not like we're starting off the hatred, but let me radicalize you this way at a local level. So by the time we build up to that federal level, we already got that power base. And so, Tamama, I'm gonna pass this over to you to think about, where can we start? Are there any organizations, any political parties, any that are already doing that, and kind of meet the message that we could really take to the next level?
Well, I'll
Thinking about
start with
how strong the DNC is too in many of our Black cities and Black spaces.
I love this question, and I will say the answer is, are there organizations? I don't know the answer to that question, but I can start with an analysis of how did we get here, and how do we avoid creating something else that's similar to what we already have. And so just thinking about, you mentioned, like when you started this, the cities and the locations that we're in. And I want to just point out something interesting. You are in DC, which is the seat of all political power in this country. And then both Tavion and myself are in port cities, which are centers for economic and commerce in the country. Actually, really high centers for economics and commerce in this city, in this country. So let's talk about the city center model and just really doing some analysis of how we've been bamboozled into one, the political system is a mechanism that helps fuel the capitalist venture within the city models. If you look at city models, and I'm not saying don't be civic, don't be engaged. I'm not promoting any anti anything, no isms or schisms. I am just saying factually, cities are mechanisms to help center commerce around a resource. So when we begin to get more strategic around how we've been bamboozled to participate in these mechanisms that continue to extract from us, we can then begin to start envisioning a world where we have control over our resources and managing things for ourselves. So that said, anti-political banter here, I would lift up communals, commons as mechanisms and ways of being that don't allow us to be bamboozled by the capitalist game that cities are organized by. And for those of us who have to be in these city mechanisms, we just know that these things are structured in a way to really keep our power decentralized and actually power being led into someone else's pockets, so to say. So the mechanisms that we're actually participating in this civic model with city living and the city mechanisms are actually the crux. They are at the beginning and the end of how power has been disbanded around our communities. So y'all say, okay, well, Tamai, you've been real wild and radical now. So you talking about us moving to the country and getting in communals? No, I want us to understand that the way we show up, the way we participate is actually leaning into the model that further keeps us extracted. So there, while I don't promote a party, I promote practices, intentionality, intentional practice around ways of being that doesn't feed into the model. So to really just hone in a little bit on my reply, I think that it may be that we do the divestment model to a degree and think of ways that we end up reinvesting in things that are more tangible, more meaningful for community action. What does it look like to have localized economies? What does it look like to have other economic systems within our communities that help raise our collective wealth and collective well-being? Does it look like holding people accountable when they don't show up, but not continuing to feed into their pockets? Bezos, Walmart, all those other people that are in power now. How do we continue to not invest in those things that keep cities centralizing wealth to the powers that be? So I don't have an answer to is there a party, but I do think that there is a set of practices and principles that we can lean into that help improve our situation.
Thank you, Tamar. I appreciate you elevating and lifting that up. And I was last year sometime I was listening to Due South. You know, I don't know if you all are familiar with that kind of documentary. I think it's on HBO or something like that, where it was a New York Times journalist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'm sorry, brother. It'll come back to me. But he was talking about, he's from Louisiana, not New Orleans, a smaller town, and in New York City for decades, and that it's time for Black people to move back south, to reverse migrate. And ever since the Civil Rights Act was passed, the largest migration has been back southward from Black people in terms of a collective has been going back south. But he identified 5 states, which Louisiana was one of them, that Black people could have a majority in. And until we have that majority at the local and the state level, it's going to be hard to influence what happens at the national level because we're so spread out and we don't have a huge block. And I thought that was an interesting concept. I'm not about to pick up and just go back south to where my family migrated from right now, from Lamar, South Carolina, or anything like that. But as we think about different approaches to kind of change at federal level, do you think that's something to pilot? Maybe getting so many Black people to take over one state, or at a time, at every level, to see how we can start building that consciousness and building that power, realizing that we are monolithic just because we Black. Don't mean we all, like you said, Tavion, think the same. We're not even speaking the same language in terms of understanding the same concepts, but that is one solution that's out there. Black folks migrating back south into 5 states in particular. I think it was Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, maybe I can't remember if it was North Carolina, South Carolina. I think were the 5 states to try to take back. What are your thoughts about that? Just as something that we think about building that power and proximity.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I'll actually go back to the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which was a part of SNCC, and they had similar demographics. They was majority in state and locally, so on and so forth. That didn't necessarily mean franchise, right? They'll gerrymander, they'll cut up districts, they'll do all sorts of, or counties, so on and so forth. They'll do all sorts of gamesmanship in order to dilute and decentralize, like Tamar was saying, our vote and our power. And so, yes, it's something to pay attention to for sure. But also, like you were speaking about in your last question, having an eye on the ways in which they've been able to kneecap all of our movements, basically, or COINTELPRO all of our movements, or so on and so forth, right? They've been able to consistently eat away at the progress and the strategies, which is again why we need to be able to isolate and be able to bring forth old ideas, reimagined ideas, and reacclimate them to what we're dealing with today and age. Understanding that like what's underneath it is the same mechanisms and analysis, but we have slightly different. The war state is much bigger than what it used to be, and so you got to think about these things. I did want to kind of touch on your last question that you posed to Tamar, because I just heard this woman, Shama Sawant, speak from Workers Fight Back, and they're particularly organizing labor. And so I think that's really important in any sort of mass movement to destabilize or dispossess or dislocate the centers of power in the political structure right now is organizing labor. And so like getting back to that class analysis, just understanding how these city centers are used to like depress labor and have like just repositories of labor available, right? So you have your homelessness and unemployment and so on and so forth, but they're there to keep labor depressed. That structure is there to allow for that, so that they can bargain, the crumbs that they throw away from their profits, right? So understand, I wanted to bring that out and also bring forward as well, if we are organizing and trying to recenter power, mutual aid is a huge part of that, right? So outside of organizing labor, being able to feed one another, one of the things that seen is working with the Cooperative Cannabis Project and that co-op ecosystem on the distribution side of the supply chain is with our cultivators, having them work with or also cultivate food and use the networks and infrastructure of cannabis distribution for food distribution into those communities, Black and Afro Latinx, but also many other communities that deal with food apartheid. And the ability to actually feed people gives you the ability to lead them in a very real sense. So I feel like both of these things have to be worked at the same time. between very local mutual aid grassroots efforts and then also larger efforts around organizing labor. And I will say recently left my job to do nonprofit work full time, but I was a union member. And I will say that our unions are very weak right now. We have the lowest union representation in America since, like, in history right now. And I can say the mechanisms, unions organizing together is a very hard thing to do based on their structure. They are not allowed to necessarily talk to one another and organize collectively together. Like, that is a hard rule around different unions, and them not having influence on a smaller union is the argument they would make. But it's really a way to keep folks from labor from organizing, right? And so that's a very structural mechanism that is in place that we have to think about when we're talking about organizing labor, because clearly having unions be a part of that organization is going to be super important. So yeah, I just wanted to throw those things out.
Thank you, Tavion. I'm glad you elevated labor unions. As a granddaughter and a niece of union organizers, my grandfather and my auntie were industrial sector union organizers. Definitely understand the importance. And just like when we look at history and analysis, when you look at the attacks on labor unions and when that really started upping in the 60s and 70s, that's when these wage gaps increase between how much a CEO is earning and how much a worker is earning is directly correlated to weakening of unions, and not just like wage differences, but also other benefits started is a direct correlation with attack on unions and attack on benefits that laborers have all over. So thank you for elevating that, because we are in a country that is very much anti-union, which is a part of this capitalistic system we're in. I want to let folks know we're going to be opening up to questions and comments, any gems from folks who have joined us tonight. But before we go into kind of like an open dialogue, I want to just give both of you the opportunity to do to let us kind of know two things in the same thought, so you can have a minute to think about it. What are, in your opinion, the top issues facing our Black communities that we need to all be focused on? Like, what are the top, if it's one, if it's two, if it's three, right? What are the top few things that we really need to be focused on? And then the second part of that question, right? That's the problem. It's going to be that solution, right? And I love kind of asking it, framing it in this way, where we're thinking about magic, right? And real change. And I was listening to Adrienne Marie Brown a while ago, and she reminded us on the podcast that she was on that Harriet Tubman started with a dream, right? To see her people free. She didn't start with the strategy, didn't know the plan, but she had to start with that dream of freedom and knowing that it could be achieved if I work towards it, right? So, and then Adrienne also reminds us that we live right now in somebody else's dream. These are all man-made systems that was created by, folks of European descent hundreds and thousands of years ago, before any of us on this planet were even thought of into existence. And there's no like extraterrestrial force forcing us to live this way. And we saw that over COVID, how all of a sudden the world did shut down to some extent, where it was like, no, everything can't shut down. Yeah, it did. And so knowing that we're in a system that's man-made, it's not, biological, there's no bigger force besides human beings forcing us to be this way, right? And someone had imagined a system of oppression for us to live in and carry out for so long. When you dream and imagine about freedom and liberation, like, what would that look like for you? And if you had a magic wand, like, what would those solutions be to those top challenges that you think we should address? So what's your dream? And then kind of what's the challenges? Whichever order you want to take it in terms of, you want to dream first, then the challenge, or the challenge then the dream. And whoever wants to start. Okay.
Yeah, I'll hop in there. I'm as what they call a blurred Black nerd, so I love sci-fi and science fiction. I do a lot of cosplay stuff, so I get in there, and this gives me also space and freedom to dream. And we see movies and TV depict these utopian societies where people don't have to like do all this extra excess labor to meet their needs, and folks are able to live and really prosper doing creative things. When I say prosper, prosper mentally, emotionally. We have this society that prosperity is wrapped up in a dollar or some monetary value, when prosperity is also love. It's about family. It's about the abundance of culture, the abundance of relaxation. And so for me, I see a society where we're able to be liberated enough to dream, to be whatever it is that we perceive we can be. I am stepping into this new era of artistry. So what does it look like for me to be able to be creative and use my brain resources to think about things that are artistic? So I see that. I mean, I like the Octavia Butler sci-fi stuff. So how can we create some societies that are utopian in nature, where people are liberated to use their creativity to make the world beautiful? And so one of the major problems, or I would say, is ownership. If you look at where we are today, that the pendulum needs to change from a very small percentage of the world's population owns majority of the world's resources. How did that happen? How did we let this small group of people come in and say they own all this stuff? And we have a big old globe that we live on that's full of resources. So owning natural resources and owning our labor are the first two movements I would prioritize in shifting the capitalist pendulum. Without the land, without the resources, and without the labor, they can't create that money. So let us figure out how to own that stuff ourselves, collectively co-manage, and really figure out ways that we are democratically uh, governing the resources that are necessary for our survival. So I'll stop there, and I'll keep dreaming about my sci-fi society.
Yeah, thank you. And Tavion, we'll end with you.
This is a really, really loaded question. You know, I could say, I think Tamad named a amazing thing right now, which is ownership of labor, and that being a big part of it. Ultimately, even the concept of ownership bothers me, because it's all in our imagination, right? And we have the power to dream about any system. I find that, like I said, I have a lot of arguments with Black capitalists when I'm having this conversation and trying to figure out what they're talking about. They make it seem as if this system is natural, as if it was born out of stardust and was always here, and as you know, as based in reality as a universe ourselves, right? Like, this is the only logical way in which this could come out of. For example, you often hear people talk about competition. Like without capitalism, there's no competition, which is crazy to me when we're thinking about the capaciousness of human emotion and feelings, and what in competition. You're telling me competition is such a human basic instinct and driver, the first and foremost, the competition with oneself, right? And mastery of oneself. You telling me that competition itself is born out of capitalism? That's how lost in this analysis we are, where we actually make it a thing of nature. And so I believe that mythology and that sort of zeitgeist around what we're living in, and how concrete and unmovable it is probably, it's the biggest hurdle to dreaming. It's the biggest hurdle to the imagination for alternative realities and futures. And I guess if I had to, what would it look like? Um, and maybe this is just again, we saying words and have different meanings. I personally don't believe in utopia. I think there's a level of struggle that the human experience requires, personally, but um I do see a very similar place as you do, as far as the ability to express one's human capability, imagination, physically, emotionally, spiritually, so on and so forth, to abundance with no friction. Someone, board member of my organization, she posed this question that she heard one time, which is, who are you uninterrupted? And I just so powerful when you think about that interruption and who you could be. And so that's probably what look like. Whatever the answer to that is, who are we uninterrupted? And that's for me would be what it looks like if we got it right.
Thank you, bro, Ashe. And as I ask myself that question, I just come with it would feel like sunshine. That's what I want to feel like, sunshine. Not that we don't have any rain, because you can't have sunshine without rain sometimes, but it will feel like sunshine. So I appreciate both of you all. I thank you all for sharing your knowledge, yourself, your wisdom, and just your presence with us. And just want to open it up now to the community that's joined us tonight to engage in this conversation so we can have some two-way dialogue. So we appreciate you all being here tonight and just want to open it up to you. So we have two ways we can engage in two-way exchange. You can ask your question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can elevate you to be able to come off of mute and ask your question live, right? And so we do got one question in the chat already. So Letitia Benson, now if I'm mispronouncing your name, please correct me. What are some of the practices recommended, and where can we go to learn more and share? Anyone wants to?
Okay, I'll jump in real quick unless you have something to say, to my in preparation of this, I took go back to Mississippi. Cooperative Jackson is doing mad work. CDFI, credit union, farmers co-op, worker co-ops, the whole ecosystem of solidarity, economics and whatnot. And I wanted to read some of the bulletins for what they say it like has been their praxis, basically. And so they spoke about programs or pillars, building people assemblies, and that's basically assemblies are organized as expressions of participatory or direct democracy, wherein there's guided facilitation and agenda setting provided by the committees that compose the People's Task Force, but not preordained hierarchy. And so basically, bringing community together around democratic leadership, small d, democratic processes. Building a network of progressive political candidates, which I think is huge. You don't have enough of those. Like I said, organizing outside of the Democratic Party and really looking towards progressive candidates and supporting them and helping them win elections. And then building a broad-based solidarity economy. And I just want to zoom in a little bit more into those points. As far as like solidarity economy and network of cooperative and mutually reinforcing enterprises and institutions, specifically worker consumer housing cooperatives and community development, credit unions and foundations, solidarity economy. So I would say if you have like a CDFI in your community, if you have a credit union in your community, put your dollars there, be a part of that. Give energy into those things, into those organizations. And I'm sure once you're in that space, you could easily trip into some organizing. Like, it's not so hard. Like, people will take you in if you want to actually be a part of some sort of movement in solidarity economy or anything. No one will stop you, I promise you. So like, go ahead, get active, show up, and you'll be welcome with open arms and given some homework really soon.
Yeah, I'll just pile on to what Tavian just shared and just isolate a practice from an individual perspective. I think disrupting default practices is a good start, and recognizing how to like move things. I think that understanding the whole colonist agenda. We've been colonized out of a way of being into a being that's not natural and innate to us. And so disrupting the default practices that we want to go to the grocery store and buy all of our stuff. We want to go to these different places and be convenient for ourselves. And so what does it look like to change that in your own self and disrupt that? And so that's a practice I would like to lift up, is disrupting default practices. And then the other, I just want to highlight, I really, really appreciate the work that Cooperation Jackson is doing. And they brought a group by here not too long ago, the economic solidarity economies. And I'm sorry, my language is not coming up, but they brought a process of intent commitment pooling, which I thought was really interesting, in a way of looking at different means for a shared economy. And I want to say that we think of the capitalist way of being as the only way of meeting our needs. And there are other practices that we can do, trades, exchanges, meaningful exchange, so that needs can be made. So I just want to say, look for other types of exchanges outside of trading dollars for your labor, time, etc. And that commitment pooling was, I thought, a very intriguing way of being. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you both for that. I also want to say NDCC, I mean NCCD, like this is also a platform, the conference that Ron mentioned that's coming up in Atlanta, going to be an opportunity to meet a lot more folks who are like-minded, probably some in the same cities or localities in which you live in which you may not have known about. So definitely starting here as an option, and just as we're uplifting Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer throughout our conversation tonight, remember, you are the savior. You are the one you've been waiting for. And starting internal, like we have to change ourselves to change the world, like Tamar mentioned, is definitely the first place to start. At least for me, in order to get to the place of liberation, I had to first decolonize and deprogram myself. And it's a process, right? I ain't saying that I don't ever go to, CVS or Target, because at the end of the day, we got to realize, because we do live in a capitalistic system, and it's kind of a globalized capitalistic system, there's almost nothing produced that doesn't have a hint of that in it, right? Where the raw materials coming from for the cell phones that we communicate on, the activism, right? It's in every single part. Like Tamar, I think you said what was that, the smallest minuscule you can imagine. Even if I go to do some bartering to get my hair done, where those hair products coming from? Are they made like there locally? Is it some synthetic stuff that's being like, everything is a part of the system. So realizing that, reconciling that and giving yourself some grace, because this is the world we live in. I want to also invite Ron into the conversation. Ron, I don't know if you're still with us. If you want to
Yes, I
provide
am.
practices and
I've
some
been listening. I've been listening. And
okay, wonderful.
I
If
take
you
my
want to
hat off to
chime
all
in.
three of you. All three of you. You really elevated the conversation. You really did. And I'm really so proud of all three of you and what you bring into the space. And so I do want to just share that this convening that we're hosting in Atlanta is different from anything else we've ever done, because we're talking about developing a strategic agenda for Black folks moving forward. And so while we have these opportunities that are localized, we're trying now to localize them regionally and bring them up to a national level, where across state lines, across county lines, across city lines, that we're cooperating, that we're building, that we're measuring our outcomes. And so I'm so I've just been listening all evening to all three of you, and I really just happy to say that I'm really proud of what all three of you bring into space. If I was to leave here today or tomorrow, I feel really good to know that there's people like you who are here to carry the mantle. Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. That means so much. Thank you, brother. Thank you. We have a hand raised from Carol. Carol, I'm going to elevate you so you can ask your question live.
Yes, I'm Carol, and I'm from Pittsburgh. And hi, everyone. Hi, Ron. I
Hey,
really
Carol.
appreciate this. Me and Ron, we have talked in the past about a succession plan, so y'all making me smile anyway. All the things that was mentioned tonight, I really, really like wave my red, black, and green flag. I do whatever I need to do. If I gotta go out on the street and do my little war dance, I do it. But I think one of the problems are like y'all are just so a wealth of information, right? And like, okay, when we do get back, go to the conferences, and then we come back home. It's like a tone deaf thing, right? And then we have to continue on, organizing and putting the word out there the best we can and educating and all. But I just always think it would be so nice if we had a real live media outlet, right? And I'm from Pittsburgh, and we only have one radio station, right? And I mean, that's, can communicate out to Black people, period. And then, like, we do a lot of education workshops similar to this with Ujima Collective. And, we have a credit union um, Black cooperative. We have those things, but people are just so tone deaf. Like they just going up and down and about their life. Then if you out there trying to engage people or putting on your flyers or saying come, people are also, I don't even say the word meeting. I just say we're having a convening, right? That means that it's going to be panel, it's going to be, things going on, activities to speak to your quality of life. But I was just wanting to gain y'all thoughts because I hate losing all of this, right? And then for me, I suffer with young timers here and there. I'm like, I try to write down everything that y'all said, but that's kind of impossible. And then even if you do have it recorded, I have to take time and go back and then keep up with my other work. So I just wanted to get your thoughts because I think we just really have so many good things going on. And even the political stuff, like right now, everybody's gearing up for the campaign. And then, of course, our local political leaders, of course, people are, going to that part what they want our mayor to do to get, and he's going to do it to appease. And then we have the judges. People don't pay attention to that one judge put your child at 15 in jail for the rest of his life because you didn't even pay attention. So we have all of that going on. And last but not least, and I'm glad you're from DC, and I used to live outside of that area in Baltimore, right? Long, long time ago. Yeah, be more. And so, I know there's outside of what I'm saying about the radio reach and getting people out of the place of being tone deaf. That's what I call it. I lost my thought. Tone deaf. But how do y'all feel if one day we just really talked about putting our monies together and making us a media platform cooperative that could just stretch and wrap it all around? But I know, like, I'm a visionary, but I'm like, my little visions, need money. But, but sometimes I can't worry about money, but as much as what I want to deliver, because I just feel so bad in the time of my life, and even my children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren's life, they're just being so, they're just unlearned. So I will be quiet.
No, you don't have to. Thank you, Carol. And thank you for elevating the power of the media and communications, because that has been used as a primary tool, I would say, to hold up the system of white supremacy and imperialism. And I'm gonna do a plug for a book I finished last year I teach at Morgan State, a co-Morgan State professor, The Myth and the Propaganda of Black Buying Power, which focuses on media, race, and economics. Just recommend a good read for anyone. But Professor Ball talks about how Black media in particular has been used to push capitalism on us in ways that are much more controversial than some of us think, and how they are an engine of this white supremacist, capitalistic, imperialistic society that we're living in by pushing Black capitalism. So I'm so glad you brought up the power of communications to imagine something different, for solidarity, economics, for unity, for restorative ways of being. And so I want to put that over to both Tavion and Tama, and like helping to elevate that in terms of that power of communications. I'll put it in the chat. Thanks, Carol.
I'll tap in quickly and share that I really appreciate like lifting out how media has played this grave role in like shaping the minds and our energies and how we participate in this society. And I want to celebrate something that we're doing, an initiative that we participated in here in New Orleans with Cooperation Gumbo. Over the spring, we were able to work on a project where we had 88.1 Liberation Radio, and we partnered with an artist here locally to do what we call micro broadcasting. And if you were to name it out loud, it would probably be called pirate radio station. But just naming that the airwaves belong to no one and that we should have the liberty to say and share messaging across the airwaves. They are a universal mechanism for us to express thoughts, energies. And so in this exercise, or in this project, we created a mobile broadcasting on a tricycle. This tricycle had the representation of what would look like gumbo pots with spoons, representation of New Orleans. And the thought in that was to really get it be a shock and awe to see this big thing riding through your cultural events in the city of New Orleans with this flag on it, and to get people to notice it. So really, I think shock and awe is one strategy that we saw our political people use against us. And I think these are tactics we have to really deploy on ourselves to really get us back to a consciousness of things that are happening around us that are not for our benefit. So we actually did a little bit of what we call a propaganda campaign about our own liberation. And it's not propaganda because it's more about lifting up our own abilities and our ways of being through our own voices. And so I thought that was an interesting question. And if you get the cooperative going for the telecommunications, let me know. Our family here in New Orleans is in music and arts, my personal family, and the airwaves and broadcasting is something that we really are looking to figure out new and innovative ways to get the messaging out. So no real answer, but I resonate with your comment.
Yeah, I love your answer, Tama, because I feel like I don't know, I'm more doom and gloom sometimes. Uh, you know, America's greatest thing is propaganda, and they in that they know that capturing media is one of the most important things that you could do. So for the most part, media has been captured. I love that you uplifted Brother Ball, because you know the myth of the Black buying power, how much of the wealth is actually already captured and frozen, which we don't even have access to. And so this idea around wealth building and in the ways and the mechanisms in which we can do it are kind of off center and built into the propaganda of capitalism. Like, this is the route in which you can see that prosperity actually be produced. What I would say is, and I mean, we've had a deep history, a very long history of having our own media publications and, you know, magazines and so on and so forth. And it's really hard to monetize. It's really hard to maintain over time. I would uplift me personally. I get most of my media on YouTube now. And I would imagine a lot of people, you know, we're moving away from the television screen. So I personally watch a lot of Mark Lamont Hill and Brianna Gray, which for me are two like leftist YouTube. You know, Mark Lamont Hill has been on CNN and Fox and other places as a pundit, but I think does a really good job with analysis and keeping us updated on international and national policies and politics and movement work that's happening, particularly Gaza and the genocide that's being executed over there right now. So yeah, I will point to them, and they have their media platforms. You know, you also got what's my man? What's my man? Dang, I'm forgetting his name. He got like a very dang, why am I forgetting his name? All right, we'll move on, but it's gonna come to me like as soon as it's so annoying. It's gonna come to me. Roland Martin. There you go. Roland Martin also has now. Listen, you know, our politics diverge a little bit. I would say our politics diverge a little bit, but as far as like someone who I think has good intention for creating Black media and building Black liberation, I think he has good intention, and there is some good information. He moves towards the Democratic Party a little bit too much for me personally, and is a little bit too beholden to that system for me, which I think is, you know, works against us. I feel like a lot to what you were saying, Jamila, as far as like Black media pushing us towards this particular ethos. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt, but let's uplift you know, our folks out here trying to do it on independent media platforms. Those are the ones that I would name.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things for me, just being very honest, is Tavion, you mentioned it earlier, trying to, I probably shouldn't say this, trying to love on bougie Black people. And then like it's time to come back into the fold. Not the ones who have completely like, I'm gonna assimilate all that. You lost to the Sauls, Harriet would have left you. I'm afraid that you make it up to the Holy Gates. And you know, have to deal with you there. But I've been trying to see where we are aligned and how we can do some of that coalition building. Like there are other ways, right, to do it. And you should know this, because if capitalism was working, you wouldn't always be crying for white capitalistic dollars into your media. Because one of the things that, this is no dig, one of those journalists or media personalities you mentioned is always talking about how certain businesses aren't purchasing ads and
It's
giving.
rolling. It's rolling.
Oh yeah, you say, you know, isn't buying time on Black media. It's like, why you want Walmart to just push his bullshit products on us? You know what I mean? But it is a place to start, and I think there's a lot there that we can build off. So for me, I'm looking at how to build, starting where we do agree, and kind of elevate that consciousness, and not where we disagree. So thank you for elevating that, Tavion. I want to see if we have any more questions that are coming up. I don't see any in the chat. I don't see any hand raised. So I'm going to take a last call, right? Last call. For any questions, acknowledgments, thank yous, gems, before we allow each of our panelists and Ron to kind of have some final words and final thoughts to leave us tonight. Oh, we have one from Celine. Oh, Celine, where you go? Okay, wait a minute. All right, Celine, I'm gonna elevate you and you can ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. I haven't had the best connection, so if this has already been discussed, just dismiss me and y'all can move on. But I at my organization, we're talking a lot about conflict because we are trying to do this big umbrella coalition building with Black Kentuckians who are aligned enough to have a similar vision, similar values, but as Tavion was saying earlier, maybe we are sometimes saying the same words, but not meaning exactly the same thing or having the same path. So like, how do you all recommend navigating conflict that will inevitably arise in strategic conversations and things like that in a generative way and in a way that's not discarding people, but allows for that conflict to help us grow stronger together. Would love any tips y'all have or insights.
Celine, that is a wonderful question. I'm just gonna say that, and I thank you for just elevating that. Conflict is a part of human. We're all gonna have conflict. It's not something
Yeah.
to run away from. It's a part of our nature. Look at every single species on Earth. There's some type of conflict. And what you said about conflict that's transformative, that's dynamic, that's regenerative, and not harmful is what we're looking for. And knowing that we will harm each other, right? Every single person will hurt somebody else in this lifetime. You'll do it multiple times. It may be small or big. Think about like even your parents, right? And the relationships you have with some people that are most intimate. And I think, we by embracing that it's a part of life, not trying to run away from it, we can really be intentional about like when conflict happens, how we're going to deal with it and what systems of accountability do we have and repair to do that. So something that I'm involved with in the movement work and the organizing work that I do are having accountability circles. And having a lot of those are comprised by elders and kind of intergenerational, but having these circles of care, these circles of love and accountability that can hold you accountable, and also having processes in place when harm does happen, because some harms are big, some harms are small, so that we're able to work through that. And what you all are experiencing is nothing like not just unique to Kentucky, because we've seen so many movements over the last several years canceling each other. Certain people canceled out this cancel culture instead of this love culture is still a symptom of capitalism to me. It's still a symptom of individualism to me within the movement space. And so there's a need for us to move away from necessarily cancel culture to love culture, which accountability is a part of love, right? And so, how are we reaching people with love and calling each other in instead of just pushing each other to the side? Because the more we push it aside, we're going to just be still holding up that individualistic thinking, which is like one of the drivers of capitalism, the individual, right? It's just me, myself. I can't eat. I got to eat before you eat, all that stuff. And so, putting those practices into place and people saying like, this is how you hold me accountable, this is how I want repair to be done when I'm harmed, and putting and making sure you have that support there. And that's a practice. I want to say like it's a practice, like basketball, right? You got to practice at it to get to that level of LeBron, of Kobe. They weren't just born Kobe and LeBron. I mean, they were born, with some talent, but they had to practice. You were in the gym, you were practicing that. It doesn't just come naturally. It doesn't just reach there. It's a practice, and realizing that when you're practicing, you won't get it right all the time, right? And it's a lifelong practice. So that's where I'll say, and just personally, I try to start within my family, with like in my intimate relationships, and like how are we accountable to each other, and I'm able to say, hey, you hurt me, you harmed me, instead of just be like, oh, it's just my friend, they're always this way. Nope, you don't got to be this way, we can be better. So that's what I do, and kind of what we do in some of the circles. And I'll pass it over to Tamar and Tavion and Ron if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I'll plus one the having the care circles and people that can wrap around when an unmet need arises, because at the center of conflict sometimes is an unmet need. And so how do we put care at the center of supporting people being in spaces, meeting those needs so that people can hold that space together? How do we collectively meet our needs? And one of the ways we do this in the organizing that I'm exposed to, and I'll tell this by sharing a little story. My family is a combined family. So my husband and I are like the Brady Bunch. He has his children, I have my children. We came together and we're like community. One of the things that really was challenging for me coming into that space, because he has always been collective and cooperative in the way they work together. And I came from the deep South. So my family was one of those people that things got shoved under the rug and we don't talk about that in public. So a practice that I built with being in the relationship that I'm in now is that we sit at the table together and we actively process tensions together as a family. So when one of us has a problem, we all have a problem. We work together to figure out co create solutions together and really actively process tensions together. So I say that because what I've seen in some of the organizing is groups that work to create a culture of processing tensions together build strong alliances together. They build strong trust with each other if done effectively in the right way. And so we don't push that stuff under the rug. We sit at the table together and we try to, work it out together, because that's the only way we gonna really be in space to care for each other in a way that's meaningful. And to act as if someone is demonized because they got something wrong is not always the right answer. We have to figure out ways to be more supportive of when things don't come across the right way and recognize that we all decolonizing at the same time. So that's what I have to add on to it.
I want to jump in there too. I wrote a couple of things down, uh, and I feel like y'all basically covered it. But I wrote down paternalism and purity. So like these purity tests can make things hard, right? Also the paternalism, when if you're in conversation and community trying to convince somebody rather than have dialogue, then that's going to be a problem. If you're trying to teach someone rather than understand, right, then there's going to be tensions there through that. And so that's where the paternalism come from. Also, and this is basically speaking of what y'all saying, I also wrote down psychological safety and the ability to communicate hard things and understand that you're going to work through them, and it's okay to communicate hard things because we're going to develop shared understandings and shared vocabulary, so on and so forth through this process. But there will be tension, and inviting that tension along as it's healthy, right? Unhealthy tension is something that doesn't progress, where you're not actually leading towards a resolution and you're kind of just stuck. Then you're in an unhealthy cycle. You need to go ahead and find another better way to mediate that particular topic. Also, I think leading with curiosity a lot of times can solve a bunch, and just being curious. When you're curious, one, it immediately removes you from the paternalistic sort of posture. Um, but then also you could find out about the needs that Tamar was speaking to, right? Like you didn't ask the question. You got to ask the question in order to get the answers sometimes. And so yeah, I would say always, for me, I always try to lead with curiosity personally. And then you mentioned Adrienne Marie Brown, emergent strategy. If you go to the back of the book, there's a bunch of like detailed conflict resolution and facility processes and games and so on and so forth that you can reach to. There's also Our Cooperative World has a bunch of conflict resolution resources. United Federation of Worker Co-ops has a bunch of free conflict resolution resources online. And so I would say also tap into those cooperative development or like support services who do this on an everyday quotidian basis to help people work through different conflicts that arise within the group.
Thank
I
you so
was
much.
just,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, really great.
Go ahead,
I was
Celine.
perfect. I love this. It's really affirming and resembles many conversations we've had, even though we're like all still figuring it out. And thank you for the like recommendations and the tools and anything else y'all have in terms of like uh recommendations or tools to help us continue developing processes and practices would be great. We've been looking to vision change win a lot. We went through their like week-long conflict transformation training, and that was great, but always looking for additional learning. So I'll look at Adrienne Marie Brown's book and other things that were mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, and she has a cooperative she's a part of called AORTA, AORTA.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And then I will also look at Roxy Manning's nonviolent communication, because so much of our conflict comes in the way in which we're communicating. And for me, that's actually something I'm working on, honestly, is nonviolent communication. A couple of my comrades actually started a care circle around nonviolent communication. So we're in like week 6 or week 4 right now. Those of us who are in movement spaces, who are in liberation spaces, who still have to practice this, right? Because we are still a part of this culture and society where violent communication is the norm, and something people strive to. So absolutely, Celine. and I know for me, it's going to be a lifelong practice. So, all right. Any more final comments or things we want to just vibe around while we are still in this community together, this virtual community together? All right. Well, I'm gonna ask each of our panelists and Ron to just give us your final thoughts as we move forward in love and liberation and care, right? Move forward in healing and restoration and transformation and pro-Blackness, right? What are some of your final gems you want to leave with folks today as we head back out? Let's start with Tama.
Thank you. One, I just want to appreciate Ron and the Network for Developing Conscious Communities for being in the space of making sure people are sharing and having these conversations. That's important. And I think a couple of nuggets is related to creating space for us to have conversations. I think that's a first step. So those who are holding space in your communities, I just want to shout out to you for doing that work, because it takes a lot of energy to hold space and be intentional with community and just to keep being in space with each other and come to spaces like this to get charged up, because holding space takes energy. So charge your batteries whenever you can. Get to the conference in Atlanta, because that is an experience that definitely charges your battery. I also want to say connect to a set of values, principles that you're doing your work on, and find people that are aligned in those values. It may be difficult for you to align in all of them, but seek to find the points that you do agree and work out those mechanisms that move those things that we're trying to move on in collaboration, and not hone in on the things that are difficult. And then last but not least, I think going back to the roots of who we are, cultural organizing is really a good tool to get people back into space where they're at a table having conversations together. We speak in song, we speak in dance, we speak in arts and culture and food. So appeal to your community in ways that are really meaningful to us, and really figure out ways that we can lift up a shared economic practice through our culture and those things. And finally, I would just lift out places like the Highlander Center. I want to lift out the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Thank you, Tavian, for bringing them up. And also the National Association for Black Cooperators, NABC. It's a new entity, and they are also creating a table and a space for us to be in conversation with each other. So yeah, just appreciating this space first and foremost.
Tavian. Tavian.
Yes, I wanna second the gratitude that Tamad just shared around everyone here, around the network, Jamila, Ron, Emil, in particular, for holding the space and allowing us to not only have the conversation but deepen the analysis. Because again, for me, that's where the axiom of everything that we're trying to build comes out of, is around our analysis and understanding the motivating forces around how we mediate our realities as human beings. And so that's one thing. I also wanted to a point earlier, as far as like, they will call us out, they will call you radical, They will say, like, we just gotta own it sometimes. And in owning it, that don't mean taking on a narrative. Now, you say radical, I say justice, right? Like it's because that's exactly they want to shut us up, and they want to, isms and schisms, love that, right? They want to put us in these, it's important for us to define things and have these words, but then, we are expansive, I should say capacious as human beings. Like, we can hold contradictions and we can hold ambiguity in a lot. And so the idea that we should be limited again to the imagination that we're in right now. I just want everyone to try to move away from that. As far as like a very technocratic thing I want to point to is the ability for us to use our current markets to transition out of our capitalist system. And so using hyper local endowment funds, again, working with those CDFI and credit unions. But if our cooperative businesses and smoke can develop those hyper local endowment funds that can, this is what philanthropy does, right? And it's very paternalistic, right? They give us crumbs to do things that don't keep the lights on, so on and so forth. You understand how it works, that industrial complex there. But we can do that for ourselves, right? We can organize and use our money to develop these endowment funds that can grow over time and lend themselves to our economic development over time, right? And so I wanted to point to that very technocratic way to which to use our markets currently to kind of shift us away from what's happening. But yeah, much gratitude. Thank you so much for having us. I felt this is really nice. Puts a smile on my face. Thank you.
Thank you. And my final words before I give it to Ron to close us out in a mall is that I'm just reminded that we're spiritual beings as well. To think about the human and the being, it's two sides. We're spiritual beings and a human experience. And if we weren't spiritual beings, we would not still be here, right? We would not have survived that passage. We would not have survived, enslavement, concentration camps, apartheid, torture, lynching, murder, and all of that, and still have joy, and still be able to wake up and be so joyful that we are who we are and we're from the communities that we are. So just reminding, as a constant reminder, that we are spiritual beings, we have supernatural powers that we tap into as well, and that lives in our ancestry and lives in our DNA. So I just, thank you all, bless you all, many blessings. And I'm gonna turn it over to Ron and Amal for the last remarks.
Wow, thank you, Jamila, for reminding us that we are spiritual beings going through a human experience. And so with that, let's always remember to do everything in the spirit of love. Love is a unifier. And so when we step out in love, knowing that everybody's been going through their own spiritual experience, and recognize that we all are different plateaus in our spiritual unfoldment. And so patience and love is what we need definitely to give ourselves. And for those of us who are aware and awoke, we have to commit to bringing that awokeness to others. So I thank all three of you, and Amal, you did a wonderful job. You did a wonderful job. Yeah, you did a wonderful job, Amal.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you. Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and everybody who joined us today as well, taking the time out to be a part of this conversation. I want to thank our panelists for tonight. It was wonderful working with all of you throughout this planning process and throughout this entire process of this webinar. We will make sure to include the recording on our YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to refer back to anything, if there's any resources that the speakers or the panelists would want to add, they can add them to the chat right now. Like Tomas said, wonderful job, Jamila. It was really, you were very engaging as a moderator, so it was great to hear the conversation from everybody. And then I also made, to reiterate, I also included the conference link in the chat. So we're really looking forward to seeing everyone this June in Atlanta. And with that, I want to thank everybody and hope everyone has a great night. And with that, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Good night, everyone. Great to be in space with you, Tavian. Inspired by your words. Thank you, Jamila.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Jamila.
Good night.
Peace.